Now let's talk about the relationship of fractions and decimals to percents. So I'm just going to say relation to percents. Basically, percents are fractions where the whole number is always 100. So remember, I'll say recall, that fractions, you think of those as part to a whole. Well, a percent is basically just a different type of fraction. Again, I'll write it out, where the whole is expressed as 100. There's 100 parts in a fraction. In a fraction for percent. And part, well, that's whatever the percent happens to be. So, for example, %. Basically, you can think of this symbol percent symbol as 1 over 100. It literally is just saying that it's out of 100 parts. So this right here means 75 out of 100. Of course, if you want that in fraction form, you really should reduce it. I'll say 3/4, also known as 0.75. And to get that to 0.75, there's a couple of ways that we're going to discuss in just a second. One thing that we just learned a second ago was just to use long division. If you want to go from the fraction form that you've converted straight into decimal. Let's look at another example though, and then we'll try to establish a pattern for converting. So I'm going to say 30%. If I wanted to convert this into a fraction, we'll do fraction first. What I'll do is I'm going to change this percent out for 1 over 100. That's literally what it means. So I have 30 times 1 over 100. What that gives me is 30 over 100. Those zeros cancel to give me 3/10. And again, we know that 3/10 is 3/10, 0.3. Notice something for me though. If I had 30% and I wanted to go straight to a decimal, if you look at the answer, we know it's 0.3. So let's look at the pattern here. On this percent, the decimal is always assumed to go after the whole number, so it's here on the end. Notice that it moved 2 places to the left to give you 0.3 or 3/10. That's because of this 100 on the bottom. The idea is that you either use 1 over 100 in place of your percent, or you walk the decimal away from the percent 2 places, which is what we did here. Away 2 places to get rid of it. Let's practice some more examples. So again, 1 over 100, that can replace your percent sign if you're doing fractions. Or if you're doing decimal, walk the decimal away from the percent 2 places. So move left 2 places. To get rid of your percent. More examples. I'm going to work some problems from your book. On page 27, number 20. They give us 64% and they ask us to convert that to fraction, and they ask us to also convert that to decimal. So I'm going to do it in 2 different parts. First I'll do to fraction, then I'll do to decimal. Remember that once you have fraction though, you can still, decimal I meant to say. Once you have fraction, you can just convert straight to decimal. You don't have to do this separately. It's just as easy either way though. So here we have 64 times 1 over 100. Again, I'm replacing that percent sign with 1 over 100. When I multiply that, remember that's just like a whole number, 64 over 1. times 1 over 100, so I get 64 over 100, which reduces to be 16 over 25. As far as the decimal goes, I have 64%, and I'll move the decimal 2 places to the left to give me 64 hundredths. And again, there you could have used long division. What about this one, though? In your textbook, number 22, we have 125%. So literally, if I'm taking that to a fraction, that's 125 times 1 over 100, which is equal to 125 over 100, also known as 5/4, which is where the author stops. Or you can make it a mixed number. Remember, if you divide that in, it goes 1 full time with 1/4 left over. And then, of course, as far as decimals go, 125%. Move the decimal 2 times to the left. 1 1/4, or 1.25, however you say it. Cool. So we can have percents that are over 100%. Basically, it means it was an entirety of what you were talking about, plus a little more. Usually it's when you're referring to growth or something, so it would mean that it over doubled itself. It grew itself plus a quarter. Let's look at a harder one. Number 32. This one gives you 66 2/3%, and it says, you know what, convert this to a fraction. So our goal here is to convert to a fraction. Regardless of the goal, whenever you see a number and a fraction together, anytime in mathematics, hopefully what you've learned is that you want to get that into a workable form. That form being just a plain fraction. We don't play with mixed numbers in math. We put them into just improper form if we have to. So to do that, well, we just convert this back into a fraction. 66 times 3 plus 2. That gives us, I think it came out to be 200. Remember, the denominator stays the same. It was always broken up in threes, and so it stays like that. So all we've done here is we've rewritten this number as an improper fraction, and we still have our percent sign. The next thing for you to remember is just that you can replace that percent with a fraction. We just said this, that your percent really is literally just 1 over 100. So replace that. Then when you multiply, you get 200 over 300. Remember, dividing by 10 is the same as just canceling zeros on top of each other, so we get 2/3. One more of this type, then we'll go the other direction. Number 38 from your text. Write 7.3%, 0.3% as a decimal. So you have 7.3%. You want to be rid of your percent. Sure, you could put the 1 over 100 in there, but actually what I recommend, since you have a decimal already showing up pretty explicitly here, I would just move this thing. Remember, a second ago we noticed that dividing by 1 over 100 is the same thing as making the number smaller by 2 places. That's what the 2 zeros in that 100 do to it when you divide it. So we'll move this decimal 2 places to the left. So we get 0.73. So 73 thousandths. Now let's do the opposite procedure. Now let's convert 2%. So before, getting rid of the percent was easy. Change that symbol to 1 over 100, or walk away from it 2 places. But if we want to go 2%, we're going to play the opposite. Literally. Opposite. We know that this symbol meant 1 over 100. So the opposite of division would be to multiply by 100%. Or multiplying by 100, that's the equivalent of moving the decimal the opposite way. Move the decimal right 2 places. because again it's getting bigger from that 100. So you're walking toward where you want that symbol to be. So walk towards where that percent symbol should be. 2 places. That's how you can remember that. For example, (5/8). If I give you this fraction and I say, hey, convert this to a percent. Well, times it by 100%. Since it doesn't already have a decimal nice and friendly, we'll use the literal definition of percent. We'll get that in there by putting in 100%. So when you multiply here, well, let's see. Any whole number can be written with a 1 underneath, remember? So put the 1 under there and multiply straight across. 500/8%. If you want to divide that out to get a decimal, go for it. You'll get 62.5% or 62.5%, depending on if you stop with your remainder of 1 and just put it over 2, or if you like using decimals when you do your long division. But the idea is you just divide to get here. Or you could have really stopped with a fraction unless I had been specific in the directions. Now let's look at one that starts with a decimal. Example, we have 82/100ths, and we're going to convert that to a percent. Once again, timesing by 100% is the equivalent of moving that decimal 2 places, because it's going to get bigger by 2. So 82%. And if you wanted to see it explicitly, it really was the same thing as saying that times 100%. If you type that in your calculator, you would get 82%. That's it for part 1 of rational and irrational numbers. Practice converting between your percents and your decimals and fractions and all that jazz.